Hello and welcome back. Today, we are diving deep into the powerful neuroscience behind a really common struggle, why it can be so unbelievably hard to moderate your drinking or quit altogether. We're going to break down exactly what's happening inside the brain that creates this difficult and often pretty vicious cycle.
And let's start with this quote from Catherine Gray, because I think it perfectly captures a feeling that might be really familiar to some of you. That relentless internal monologue that just takes over, drowning out everything else. It's such a powerful picture of the psychological grip we're here to understand today.
So, to really get to the bottom of that grip, we first have to understand a really fundamental principle of how our brains work. You see, your brain is an absolute master at keeping things in balance.
That principle has a name. It's called homeostasis. You can basically think of it as your brain's internal thermostat. It's always working behind the scenes to keep everything on an even keel. And one of the most important things it balances is this constant push and pull between pleasure and pain.
A really great way to visualize this is to picture a seesaw. On one side, you've got all your pleasure and reward chemicals, like dopamine and serotonin. And on the other side, you've got your stress and threat chemicals, like cortisol and adrenaline. Normally, in its natural state, this seesaw is perfectly level. But then, you introduce alcohol, and it's like a giant thumb just comes and presses down hard on that pleasure side. Alcohol floods your brain with all these feel-good signals, tipping the scales way over towards reward. And that's what creates that initial buzz of relaxation or euphoria.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Your brain cannot stand being out of balance. So to fight back against that artificial push on the pleasure side, it immediately starts to compensate. How? By piling a bunch of weight onto the pain side. You can literally imagine these little gremlins of stress and anxiety jumping on the other end to force that seesaw back to level. And this forceful biological rebalancing act, well, that's what leads directly into the next, and let's be honest, often the most miserable part of the cycle, the anxious rebound. So here's how that cycle plays out, step by step. The alcohol, which is a depressant, starts to wear off and leave your system. But those stress hormones, the gremlins your brain released to fight back, they're still hanging around. You're left with this excess of stimulation, which we feel as that awful anxiety, that restlessness, and just general feeling of unease. And this is the absolute crux of the issue. This chemically induced anxiety feels terrible. So what's the fastest way to fix it? Well, more alcohol. It presses down on the pleasure side again, and for a little while, it counteracts all those extra stress chemicals. But you can see the trap, right? In doing so, it just reinforces and deepens the entire cycle. And this cycle doesn't just repeat, it actually gets worse. Over time, the brain doesn't just compensate in the moment. It starts making long-term changes to the whole seesaw. To protect itself from these constant, artificial floods of pleasure chemicals, the brain's reward system basically gets tired of it all and becomes less sensitive. It's like it's turning down the volume on its own pleasure signals, just to try and maintain some sense of balance against this constant onslaught. This whole process is called tolerance. And as you can see here, with repeated exposure, the exact same drink produces a smaller and smaller and smaller dopamine response. Pretty soon, you need more and more just to get back to that initial feeling, let alone feel great. And this creates a really profound shift in why you're drinking. As neuroscientist Judith Grisel explains so well, eventually you're no longer drinking to get that big pleasure spike. You're actually just drinking to escape the low dopamine state that has become your new normal. You're drinking just to feel okay. So this state of chronic low dopamine, well, that becomes the biological engine that drives cravings. And believe me, the brain becomes an absolute expert at learning what it needs to do to satisfy that deficit. And this is so important to understand. Addiction isn't just a chemical thing. It is a form of incredibly rapid, deeply ingrained learning. Your brain starts forging these powerful connections between situations, feelings, even times of day, and the promise of relief that alcohol seems to offer. So check this out. Here's how a craving actually works on a biological level. A simple cue, it could be anything, finishing work, feeling stressed, seeing a friend pour a drink, it triggers your brain to anticipate its usual solution. And in preparation, it actually drops your dopamine levels, creating that powerful physical urge for a drink before you've even consciously thought about wanting one. And I want to be crystal clear here. This drive is not a matter of willpower.
As Dr. Nicole Labor puts it, it's a primal survival urge coming from deep within your midbrain. When that thing activates, it can temporarily hijack the rational, forward-thinking part of your brain, making it almost impossible to think about long-term consequences. So, what happens when this entire cycle of drinking and rebounding and craving just repeats over and over again for months or even years? Well, the brain doesn't just adapt anymore, it gets fundamentally remodeled. And we are not talking about temporary changes. This is profound, long-term stuff. The actual wiring of your brain gets modified. The physical structure of your brain cells can be altered. Communication between neurotransmitters slows right down, and your baseline levels of those feel-good chemicals like dopamine and serotonin are just chronically lower. Your entire brain literally reorganizes itself around this one habit. Now, the wild thing is, this isn't your brain being broken. Not at all. It's actually the brain doing exactly what it's designed to do. It learns and becomes efficient through a process called neuroplasticity. The only problem is, it has become ruthlessly efficient at maintaining this one really destructive habit. So when you look at all of this, the seesaw, the cravings, this incredible rewiring, it all points to one thing: the brain's amazing, incredible capacity to change and adapt based on experience. And that leads us to the most crucial and honestly the most hopeful question of all. If the brain can use its power to learn addiction this deeply, can we harness that exact same power to help it learn recovery? Well, that is the exact question we are going to explore in our next explainer, when we dive into the power of neuroplasticity to heal. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. I'll see you then.